Let's continue.
But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul said, "They have brought them back from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stop, I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night." He replied, "Speak." Samuel said, "Though you were little in your own eyes, were you not made the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord appointed you king over Israel, and the Lord set you on a mission and said, 'Go, utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed.' Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord?"
Okay, so Samuel is taking Saul to task and saying, you were anointed king, you were given a command to destroy everything in this battle. So why do I hear the bleating of sheep and the lowing of cattle in the background? You just said you did the command of the Lord. And Samuel's saying, not so much.
The people, they brought.
And that's what he said. Well, it was the people. And so let's hear Saul's reaction.
Saul said to Samuel, "I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have destroyed the Amalekites. But for the spoil, the people took sheep and cattle and the best of things devoted to destruction to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal." And Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obedience to the voice of the Lord? Surely to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed then the fat of rams. For rebellion is no less a sin than divination, and stubbornness is like iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king."
So, Jonathan, there's a pretty heavy-duty power struggle right here. And Samuel is speaking the words of God to Saul. Saul is so full of himself at this point that he just is not seeing things clearly because he has been made king. Now, let's go through some of the points that you just read and just discuss where Saul went wrong. First of all, if you were to sum up in one word, what was it that was Saul's downfall?
Power.
That's easy, huh?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that happens. When we're given great power, wasn't it in the Spider-Man movie something about
That's right.
with great power comes great responsibility?
Yep.
And I might add also should be great humility.
There you go.
And Saul perhaps started out with great humility, but he certainly didn't end up that way. And the first thing is, in the reading, Jonathan, you read that Saul went to Carmel, where he set up a monument for himself.
Yeah.
And let's just think about that for a second. They win this battle, and he sets up this monument. Jamieson, Fawcett, and Brown, I just want to read a part of a comment here from that commentary. It says, "The erection of this vainglorious trophy was an additional act of disobedience. His pride had overborne his sense of duty in first raising this monument to his own honor, and then going to Gilgal to offer sacrifice to God." So the first thing he did upon winning the battle was do what? Praise himself.
Yep.
I'm the king, we won, put up a monument to me. Thank you very much, I am your king. And then he goes on to Gilgal to offer the sacrifices. So this gives you a sense of how the power went to his head, because he was taking credit for the battle. Okay, that's the first part. In verse 13 you read, it says, "When Samuel came to Saul, Saul said, 'May you be blessed of the Lord. I have carried out the command of the Lord.'" Did he?
No.
He didn't. He didn't. He carried out part of the command of the Lord, but he carried it out with an attitude of arrogance, and he did not follow through entirely with the specifics of the command. You know, if you say you carry out a command, that means you followed it all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he took sort of the high points. Hey, let's just focus on this point and this point, and oh, don't worry about that point. So, again, he's picking and choosing which part of the command of the Lord to follow. Again, that's arrogance that comes with power. And then just reread verses 20 and part of 20 and verse 21.
Saul said to Samuel, "I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. But from the spoil the people took sheep and cattle and the best of things devoted to destruction to sacrifice to the Lord your God."
Now, there's a number of things in those phrases, Jonathan. First of all, Saul says, I went and I did to do what the Lord told me to do. And just like you brought out before, he says, but the people did this. Now, let's focus for a moment. Who's king? Saul.
That's right.
Who's the one in charge? Saul. Could Saul have said, oh no, don't do that?
Absolutely.
Why didn't he? Because he was cowardly.
Didn't he also march the king back as a
trophy
for himself?
Yeah.
Look, I've defeated this king, and let me march him around and show everyone.
Right. He just had this sense of himself that was overwhelming. He was the center of the universe as far as he was concerned, and these things just piled up. And this one experience showed his true character. His true colors came out here. And it's interesting, in verse 21 he says, but from the spoil, the people took the sheep and the cattle, devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God. Not to the Lord our God.
No.
But the Lord your God.
Mm-hmm.
Who was Saul's God? It was himself.
There you go.
And that is what caused Saul to fall. It was the extraordinary power that was given to him. I wish I could find the source of this quote. I remember, and this might not be exact, somebody once said that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And how true that is in this case, in the circumstances we're looking at. So the first thing we looked at to cause the people of Israel to go wrong was a sense of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? What we look at with King Saul was his
power.
The power of the position he was given was overwhelming, and it got him out of the sense of humility that he started out with. And Samuel said to him, way back, though you were little in your own eyes, that's when you were made head of the tribes of Israel. You were little in your own eyes at one point. Look at how corrupted you have become. So, we have a nation so far that has fallen to power, and fallen to pressure rather, and a king that has fallen to power. These two events were chronological. You know, Saul was the first king, and you have his failures coming on the heels of the nation's failures, and both ended in failure. Both of these circumstances, there was what we'll call an alter ego in the form of the prophet Samuel, who was a humble voice of God. Now see, the interesting thing is Samuel, through both of these experiences, was giving the right guidance.
Yes, he was.
And he was speaking the words of God, but those words were going unheeded. One, because of the pressure. Second, because of the power. So, we know the story of how Saul falls as king. So, who's the next king?
King David.
And you've heard the phrase, I'm full of cliches, so going from the frying pan into the fire.
Yes.
Okay? Well, why don't we do our break right now, Fred, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the fire of part of David's life, and yes, some failures on his part as well.
This is Jonathan and Rick with Christian Questions on News Talk 102.3 FM, WXLM. Where did they go wrong? We'll be right back.